Hi, I'm Dr. Ben Lerner. Welcome to the MaxLife show. I'm here with Dr. Ernst. Welcome, Dr. Aaron.
Yeah.
And we're talking today about interference. We work with 5 essentials, and the idea here is that if you apply these 5 essentials to your life, you're really supporting, not distorting your body's function, and it can heal. So you've seen this all the time with your patients. They walk in and, with virtually any kind of condition, so people sometimes wonder what we treat.
Right.
And, of course, we don't treat anything. We get you well, and then your body heals of whatever it's dealing with. And so when we talk about some of those conditions, just give a couple of random things. Somebody walks in with one issue and others go away.
Well, I think the classic, of course, since being chiropractors, is a lot of people come in with neck pain or back pain and headaches. And we call them the silent miracles when someone says, hey, so I've been coming for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. My headaches are gone, and also I haven't had allergies, or I don't have sinus infections anymore.
Yeah.
Some of the comments are, I noticed a big change in my digestion, and I never knew that they were connected.
Yeah, and sometimes they don't even tell you. So they're like, by the way, I never did tell you, but I have this horrible colitis, and it's completely gone ever since you started adjusting my neck.
Right.
And one of my earliest patients, I was upper cervical when I started, so she came in with severe low back pain and severe cramping, from her menstruation cycle, and I'm adjusting her neck up here.
Right.
And it kind of ties along the same lines. We remove the interference so that the nerve system gains control of the body again. And she was, frustrated. You're touching me up here, problems down here, but remove the interference. The body's designed to heal itself.
I think that comes too because so many patients are trained in a medical world, which it's, they take this for that, and when we look at it from getting to the cause, it's not this adjustment for that condition, and that's what's so great about the body healing itself.
Yeah, and that's an empowering thought that you come in and the solution's actually in you already. It's not out here somewhere, and it's very powerful. And then you can get into, there's a book one of my mentors wrote called "A Potato is a Pill," or "When is a Potato a Pill?"
Right.
And it's when I'm now swallowing nutrition, again, with trying to use it like a drug, versus it about being the body's health. And I know you do a lot of nutrition. That's not the approach you take, but that can be misconstrued as that.
Yeah.
And so when people understand first at a high level, once again, the body's designed to be healthy. And we can interfere with that. You can interfere with it at a very young age. So you can be a baby and have interfered with that. We could have subluxation there. There could be poor nutrition at that point already. Of course, they're already giving drugs. We're doing everything we possibly can to interfere with the baby's health. So even very early on, things could be malfunctioning. And if not corrected, you just grow up with those malfunctions. So what are some points of interference? If we're telling people, hey, you should be well, you can interfere. What are the kind of the ways you can interfere?
Well, I think some of the classic ones, of course, are we have nutritional interferences, we have toxic interferences. Some of the harder ones are, of course, the mental interferences, just the idea that we believe that we can actually do something. I think that if we can jump that hurdle, we'll see instant change starting to take place within patients.
It's amazing as the founders of our profession, and of course, we've advanced light years since then, but it was designed where D.D. Palmer, the original founder, he said there's 3 ways to interfere. And you just touched on, there's mental interference, so you've got aberrant thinking that messes everything up. And I was just looking at research the other day as to how stress and other forms of mental thought actually affect the DNA.
Correct.
And you can actually have genes that are turned on to cancer because of the way you're thinking. So here, he thought of it in 1895. Here we are learning about the gene all these years later and how that bad thinking can equal genes causing cancer. He talked about toxicity that you mentioned, that you could have toxic interference and, of course, subluxation, interference with the nervous system. Then his son BJ had a clinic and said there were 3 essentials. There was nutrition that he mentioned, as well as movements, and of course, again, the essential of nerve supply. So that's the founding thought there. So when you say that for example, nutrition can interfere, describe that for people.
Well, to me, it's kind of the idea if we get the nerve system functioning to its maximum potential, as you mentioned, the body has the power, it has the ability to, but if I have this really strong nerve system, but I'm constantly poisoning myself with processed foods, or I'm eating a high-fat, fast food style diet, then what happens is we tend to slow down the ability for the body to correct itself. So of course, our goal would be to remove the interferences in every of the essential components. So if we can have a good, strong nerve system and a really clean diet, but not just clean the way most people think clean, which is salads and smoothies, but actually getting to their core interferences with how their nutrition is not working for them, but it's working against them.
Right, because I have a degree in nutrition, so at a pretty young age I started eating. Well, I used to have to make weight for wrestling in junior high school and high school, so I was into nutrition early on. But then I went to a chiropractor, did wonders for my health. But I still had limitations. That I still had problems that constantly nagged me. So when you say nutrition working for you, I'll give you my experience. Maybe you can share some of the other ones you've had. So for example, I can't do caffeine. My body, so a certain percentage of people are hypersensitive to caffeine. So like everybody else, I drink coffee and tea and things like that, and didn't realize that was causing a lot of these problems that I was having. I'm also really sensitive to eggs. So typical breakfast of eggs, I'm eating that every morning, having all kinds of stomach troubles, thinking, what's wrong with my stomach?
Because you're doing the right stuff.
Right. And then the last thing was, and I probably caused this because my snack for years and years was almonds. Mm-hmm. And so it's likely I actually gave myself a hypersensitivity to almonds by constantly eating them, to my body decided they were a toxin. Right. And so here I am eating this, what would be considered this really clean, perfect diet, and yet and I'm adjusted, and my health just isn't what it should be, given I'm fit, I'm adjusted, I'm eating this clean diet. Why do I have all these problems?
Yeah, and it's the same thing with patients, because they come in and say, well, I don't understand, I'm eating really well, and I'm sure you've experienced too. So we say, well, why don't you show me how well you're eating? Do a log, or bring in some of your snacks, and it's oh my gosh, this is nothing close to what we would consider well. And then, of course, the ability for us to now test and actually find out how well are you actually doing with your vitamins and your minerals and your nutrients, looking for the deficiencies, because when we address what's specific to you, then your health excels.
Yeah, and I think that's really critical. I love that you sort of made clear that the concept of a clean diet is probably not what people think it is. And it's one of the funniest moments in all of counseling with nutrition. So I got the degree in nutrition and then did counseling for the next 30 years. Is almost everybody says, actually, I eat pretty well.
Correct.
And then when I say, well, why don't you just write it down, just humor me, and let me see it, and 100% of the time, here it is. I guess it wasn't as good as I thought. I really never calculated all the candy. Like I just popped it here and there. I didn't realize it was 15 a day or something like that. Right. But then even when people begin to improve, there are certain things that really can be a problem for people. And that's where I got into testing myself, because as I started seeing patients that were improving their diet, again, their nerve system's improving, and it wasn't until we did testing. So we've done everything from early on, we did some, I used to look at a lot of dietary testing where you see what foods they're sensitive to. And I really stopped doing it because everybody tended to have the same kind of groupings. You saw a lot of dairy, you saw a lot of eggs, you saw a lot of nuts, just a lot of these sort of basic things. So I could look at their diet and say, rather than maybe spending the money on nutrition testing, I could see you're eating a lot of the things that pop up all the time. And some of it is because their body's actually sensitive. Some of it's because of the quality of it.
Correct.
So commercial dairy, roasted processed nuts, things like that. So what are some of the things maybe you're seeing as you're evaluating people's diets that are common to cause problems that they may be missing?
Well, of course, the typical one is, a lot of people still think wheat is healthy as long as it's a whole grain, so there's the whole gluten components. And then probably the next biggest one I see is the avenue of them thinking that, I'm taking these really good vitamins, thinking that they are supplemental to their health. And so they'll list them out, and we run the test and find out, well, you're still extremely vitamin deficient. And they'll often say, well, how can I be vitamin deficient if I'm taking all the vitamins? So I think it's a combination of foods they think are good for them, like rice and wheat and dairy, and we have to try to educate them on how that's actually probably what's causing the interference in the first place.
Yeah, and so these bad foods can interfere. So everything's working, you're actually interfering. Correct. And there really are limitations to matter.
Yes.
There are chiropractors that think we're mixers because we talk about nutrition, but then I've been doing this for 30 years.
Right.
There's a reality to my own health, to my family's health, and to many of my patients where if they're poisoning their body with the foods they're eating, whether it's just unique to their body or just poisoning Correct. In general, they're not getting anywhere with their health if we don't address this one issue too.
And I think it helps people to break through the plateaus, because we've all had that component where we start getting adjusted and we do phenomenal, and it's kind of like we start slowing down with that phenomenal result. So addressing each of the essentials, from nutrition to toxicity to even fitness, helps them to just get to the next level. And we're always trying to reach that perfection state, but it's always a work in progress.
Yeah, and I think that's something you and I strive for in our own lives, and certainly we want that for our patients. Is I'm not thinking, let me adjust you and I'm okay with a plateau.
Right.
And so I don't necessarily care if you call me a mixer. I'm looking for people to reach their health potential. I want them to achieve God's purposes. I want them to fulfill their destiny. I'm not going to say, well, this is all we do down here.
Correct.
And and that's where we started. And this is, again, through personal experience with thousands of patients as we started doing the supplement testing, because people had these extreme deficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, they didn't know it. Many of them are already taking supplements for it. And things like vitamin D, where it's just difficult to get those levels up, that if you don't do that test, they don't know that's there. And so they can really start to struggle with symptoms. And what's interesting about that too is all of us took, like in elementary school nutrition that you had to take, you learned all the different diseases that come from vitamin deficiencies. Yeah, so it's one of the most basic sciences that are out there. If you don't have vitamin D, it's rickets. If you don't have vitamin C, it's scurvy, and the whole list of other things that are attached directly to vitamins, which is why I always think it's interesting when, say, a medical doctor doesn't believe in nutrition. I'm like, you learned that in third grade, And so if you get a disease if you're super deficient, well, then what happens if you're modestly deficient?
Correct. So I think it comes to the point of, like you talked about earlier, it slows the ability down. So we may look healthy, feel healthy, act healthy, but we're not to that optimum potential because we have these subtle interferences with things in our nutrition and our toxins. And I'm sure we've all had that example of a patient who was responding very well, but would say, well, I'm still having a problem with this one area, and we run a test and we're like, well, like you said, vitamin D is almost non-existent in you. How can we expect to just keep adjusting you and over again and have that vitamin D level come up from an adjustment? We have to augment it, supplement it, and change their lifestyle.
Right. And the adjustment can help them absorb it better.
Correct. And
so they can utilize it more efficiently.
Yes.
But if the raw material isn't there,
they go hand in hand.
Yeah. You've got to get the raw material to absorb it. It's
Correct.
You're just not going to get it. Because even we're in Florida, and people just aren't enough in the sun even to absorb it that way. So you're going to need it. And the body is we're actually made of star stuff. So the carbon that makes us carbon-based life forms comes from stars.
Correct.
But it's stuff. There's material. There are raw materials that make us up, and that intelligence that runs through that nerve system is what forms the body and keeps it together. But you still need the stuff. You need raw materials.
Yeah.
And the quality of those has a lot to do with the quality of you.
Absolutely.
So if you're watching Maximize Living, our motto is everybody deserves the 5 essentials. And so as we realize that our bodies were designed to be healthy, the key is we look for interferences. And if we remove those, if we support our bodies with the 5 essentials, we say if you support it, don't distort it. Whatever you're facing today, your chance of getting well is super high. And I just like the way, Dr. Aaron, that you approach it, that we want to be at our potential, so why wouldn't we want to help our patients be at their potential?